Alright, CNT120, Chapter 3 Lab. First thing we want to do from our content page, go to our Chapter 3 Lab section. Here's our Chapter 3. Scrolling down, we're going to the Do area. We want to go to our on-campus lab folder and download a copy of the lab directions. As this lab goes on, we are actually going to make some setting changes that are going to remove the computer from our internet connection and then restore it. So you'll want to download a copy of this lab. Open this up. Make sure you select the option for file download kind of thing here. Do file download. Probably the easiest thing to do is do a PDF. And then once that's downloaded, open that up and kind of have that handy at the side over here so we can reference that. So we'll have that right there. There's a copy of my Chapter 3 lab. Now that I've done that, I'm actually going to, for my machine here, I'm just going to log out of my hack. There we go. I will open my browser as I need, but I have my lab handy here now. Okay, we are going to work with a couple different addressing in this lab, a couple different types of addressing. Our Layer 2 MAC, our Layer 3 IP, IP4 and IP6, Layer 4 port numbers, Layer 7 domain names. So we'll be breaking this up into some pieces. This first piece, we're going to be focusing on the Layer 2 addressing, MAC addressing. And we're actually going to do it on our Windows PC and on our Linux VM. So while I'm talking here, on our desktop we have VMware Workstation. We're going to launch that. And we're going to use a Linux virtual machine that's already installed here for you. It's really for our CNT125 class, but we'll use it for our basic exercises for this week. I'm going to highlight that virtual machine. I'm going to click play. If by chance it pops up a warning, select the option for I copied it. This virtual machine gets kind of re-imaged each semester, so it'll come up with a note of this virtual machine has been copied. Is that okay? So just click the I was copied or I'm copied, and then let that boot. What we're booting is Linux Mint. This is a generation or two old, but it'll work for what we're doing today. It's going to give us a chance to use some of our Linux commands that we read about in the chapter to do some of the same functions we would do on Windows. And just as a little side note, as we're doing these, Linux and Apple have a lot of similar commands. So by doing the Linux here, you're getting a little bit of Apple practice, if you will, in addition to our Windows practice here. Okay, I've booted my virtual machine. It most likely will look like so. This was my file for doing the run through earlier, so I'm just going to move that to trash and get that out of the way because we're going to make a new one. Here is my desktop. It's very similar to what you have for other operating systems. My little icon down here in the corner, this is my main menu. Here's all my different categories of applications. What you'll find is it's in here. It just is going to have some different names because a lot of names that we have on Windows here, a lot of these names have been copyrighted, especially your Microsoft Office and those sorts of things, or trademarked. So it's going to be here. It's just going to be a different name, but they have it organized into categories. So as we go, I'll be pointing out where things are. Now that I have my virtual machine up and running, we are going to look at some Layer 2 addressing on Windows, and I'll do the Windows side here first, and then we'll come over and do the Linux side. And just like our previous labs, as we go, we'll be taking some results, command results, and saving them for submission at the end of the lab. All right, so let's start off with, on our Windows PC, I'm just going to minimize my Linux VM now just to make my life a little simpler for you, a little screen a little bit simpler for you to see. We're going to open a command prompt on Windows. So down here on my bottom bar is my command prompt. I'm going to open that up, and I'm going to run the command ipconfig/all, ipconfig /all. And this will allow me to see all of my IP configuration. The main piece being, I want to see my Layer 2 MAC address. So I'm going to scroll up here till we have my Ethernet 3. This is our Intel network card, Intel network adapter that's built into our PC. And the third line down here says physical address. This is the MAC address of my computer. Now, hopefully you remember from your reading, this is a hexadecimal number. It's 48 bits if I write all these out in binary, but it's a 12-digit hex number here. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The first half identifies the manufacturer. So really in our lab, in our lab room this semester, the first half will be identical for all of ours because these machines are identical. The last half will be unique to your PC in the lab room. So there is my MAC address. This is the address that the switch connecting all of our computers in the room will use to get data to my computer as opposed to my lab partner's computer. This is the address that's going to get used. And that's the easiest way to see the MAC address on this PC. Now that is handy because there are times I'm going to filter or put rules in my devices, and a lot of times I can do that through MAC address, especially in your home network situation. You can actually put a list in for your wireless users and say only these MAC addresses are allowed to connect to me wirelessly. So it is actually handy to be able to look this up for reference purposes. So before we leave this, let's gather our result here of looking at our MAC address. So I'm going to start a text file. So I'll go here and I will do Notepad, just like we've done before. And in here, I'm going to put a label right off the bat. I'll put in here, this is like CNT120, Chapter 3 Lab. And I'm going to put a label here that this is my layer 2 MAC address. And I'm going to say Windows up here as well, Windows PC, something of that nature. I'm going to save this. I'll save this to my Documents folder, that way I can find it later. And I will save this as 120 Chapter 3 Lab, and I'll save it as Windows. That way I know this is my Windows text file. Make sure you leave that .txt file extension there so D2L understands our file. So I'll save that. I'm going to highlight my MAC address that's here. I'll just highlight the first couple lines. I'll hit the Enter key to copy. I will come over here to my text file, and I will Control-V paste it in. And this is my MAC address from my Windows PC that I'm saving into my text file. So I will save that, and I'm going to add to that as I go. So I'm just going to minimize that for now, and I'm going to minimize my command prompt in Windows for now. I'm going to go back to my Linux virtual machine, and I should have this boot up good to go. By chance, if it prompts you for a password, it should be CNT class. CNT class should be the password if it prompts you for that. All right, I'm going to open up a terminal prompt in here and do a very similar process. So down here in the bottom bar is our terminal prompt, or I should be able to find that under, I think it's under accessories on here. Accessories. I think if I scroll down, wait, where is it? Administration, maybe. Maybe it's under, I'm trying to remember where it was. Actually, it's right here on the start bar over here. Mr. Brown's looking right by it. There it is as well. Or I can actually start typing terminal up here, and that'll bring that up for me. Boom. So I'll bring up my terminal prompt. Here, I'm going to issue the command ifconfig, interface config. That is actually the same config that Mac and Apple computers as well as Linux computers use. ifconfig. This will show me my interface configuration, and as I see in here, it does show me my IP address, but it also shows me my, if I look a little closer up here, my hardware address. This is the MAC address of this Linux virtual machine. Now, the beginning here, I believe should be the same for all of ours because this is coming from VMware. We're all running VMware. So I believe the beginning on all of ours will be this, but the last half will be unique to our virtual machine in the lab room. That is my MAC address for this Linux virtual machine. Just like on the Windows side, we're going to create a text file and we're going to record our results. So we'll do menu accessories text editor. So menu accessories down here text editor, or again, I could start typing up here in the little box text editor and it'll pull that up for me right there. I'll open that guy up. And I'll put a label in here as well, CNT120, Chapter 3 Lab. This is my Linux VM. And I will put in here, this is my layer 2 MAC address. Now I'll save this file before I go any further, so I'll do a file, save as. Here, I think I'll go to my desktop, so it's going to be a little easier to find. And I will give this a name of, 120 Chapter 3 Lab, and I'll call it Linux as well. Now, I do want to make sure I put the .txt file extension. That is not putting that there by default, so I'll do .txt. And again, that'll make it a text file that D2L will understand. So I'll do a save there, and it should pop up here on my desktop. Right there it is, and I will add to it. So over here, I'm going to copy I'll copy this first line here because that shows me my command as well as my MAC address. And I can actually right-click copy on this one and I can come over here and right-click paste. And there is the MAC address on my Linux machine. Now, we will end up saving this file, and then later on in the lab, we will log into D2L from our virtual machine and just submit this text file. So don't panic at this point. We'll be able to get that submitted later. So there is looking at my MAC address on Windows as well as on Linux, and this actually works on Apple as well. The command result looks a little different, but the same command will get me similar results. So there's my layer 2 MAC address on both of our systems. We'll come back in the next podcast and start working on IP addressing, static IP4 addressing.